Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming Studios. I'm Craig, and today we're gonna go over the results of my GT that I took my Tyranids 2 to the last week. This is also, I'm gonna touch on a little bit of the other Tyranid lists and what I kind of learned from there, things I thought before this GT. I'd only played a handful of games with the new book, and these 5 games I played here really allowed me to hone in how I like to play the list I came up with, along with just using the Tyranids in general. Things I learned, what to use, what not to use, how to use. We'll go into all of that. So if that sounds good to you guys, do hit that little like button and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on all of our content here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios. And if you want to support us a little bit more, do consider becoming a member, get access to our members only Discord channel and special videos, as well as there's an Etsy shop link down below. Now, all that out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So in the GT results, I went, now I have to put a little asterisk by this. I went 4-1 with this Tyranid list. I put a little asterisk because technically, if you looked for it in Best Coast Pairings apps, it says 3-2. I'll explain it later in the game. There was a scoring mishap. It was the last game of the event. It didn't really affect, I mean, yes, it affected my placement, but it didn't put me out of the top 5 or into the top 5, vice versa. I didn't want to deal with it. It'd been a long event in my mind, in the way I played and everything. I won, so just put that out of the way. It was a good game. Nonetheless, it's just a little scoring mishap, and that's okay. So that was the results. Me going 4-1 technically for my sake and how I treat the list. 6th place out of 40 people. I also did receive a best painted total army, so that was awesome to get that. The normal guy who wins it every time wasn't there, so I got to sneak in with that reward. And we'll go over a little bit of the review of what was at the tournament, and then I'll give you a little recap of my list, my games, how I think things went. So first off, tournament review. This was the Renegade Spring Up GT. There were 11 Marine players, 4 Grey Knights, 2 Custodies, 1 Sisters, and 1 Imperial Knight. For the Chaos, we had 1 Chaos Marine with an asterisk because it really was not so much just the Space Marines as it was other things. 3,000 Suns, 1 Death card, and 1 Bellicor detachment. So it was Bellicor and then Chaos Marines and Demons, which was cool to see. For the Xenos, we had 4 Tyranid players, 4 Tau, 1 Eldar, 2 Drukhari, 2 Harlequin, and 2 Necron players. Good to see Necron still doing well in the tournament. Some other notes for the tournament we played. So it was 5 rounds. We knew the missions ahead of time. Earlier in the week, they did say what round was playing what mission. And it was something I've done only once before, so it was kind of new to me, was player-placed terrain. So we each had identical pieces of terrain, and we took turns, attacker versus defender, placing terrain on our halves of the table. And there were rules at how far each type of terrain had to be apart from each other, and it allowed you to play a little more strategic with how you wanted to set up your terrain, which was good. It just was another element of thinking that in every game I didn't fully think through until it was the end of the tournament. I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do in order to place terrain to my advantage properly. So, it was fun. I guess it works for a tournament setting because you are playing with the terrain, and as long as the terrain is balanced, then I didn't see any reason wrong with it. I enjoyed it. I could see if your terrain was not balanced, and some people had, this amount of terrain that was this shape, and some people this amount of terrain, this shape. I could see some really, some issues with that. However, we had fairly perfectly balanced terrain on all of our tables. Fortunate for that. So player-placed terrain worked well for us. Now, let's go into the game recaps. Again, 5 games here. So the first game, starting off against Custodies. This was an 88-74 win. They were using what I would consider a pretty standard Emperor's Chosen list. So Emperor's Chosen are the ones who ignore mortal wounds on a 4-up, which is very good against Tyranids. They had, groups of Custodian Guard, group of Terminators, the Jet Bikes, Jet Bike Captain, Trajan Valoris, there we go. And one of those big scary Gladius Dreadnought. So the secondaries I chose for this game was Stranglehold, Warp Ritual, and Retrieve Nachmund Data. Nachmund Data ended up being a secondary that I picked more often than I anticipated. However, most of the time it worked out to be okay for me. I never got it the full 4 times on any game that I picked it, I believe. However, I always got it the 3 times at least. So that was Nachmund Data for those ones. Turn 2, his turn 2, I believe I went first in this game. He had some pretty poor rolls swinging at my Raveners, and I had some pretty good saves for what poor rolls he had, and that really swung the game. There's not much else to it. It was a very big, one objective in the middle, and we were constantly trading back and forth. My Hive Tyrant was going in, doing the Warp Ritual, slicing down a unit, running away as best he could. Until the end of the game, I did run out of CP, and I could not get him out of there as I wanted to, and he was eventually cut down, though he did his job. Some key units, like I said, the Warriors were very good. Some of them were there really just, most of the units pretty much just gummed up the center objective. I did have one of my squads with the Venom Cannon go deal with the Alaris Terminators back in the backfield, and they did eventually, with some help, clean out those Alaris Terminators. But especially that 4-man squad I have with the Scything Talons, they were able to slice up the Sisters. I used them as a turn 1 charge. Go in there, beat up the Sisters, and then fall back with our overrun strat and hide on the objective. So there. Oh, I should have said this in case you're just watching this video and you want to know what is my list. I will talk it at the end. Although there will be a video. There has been a video already right there. I think you guys can check it out. Maybe it's over there. I'll never know. You guys can check out. I go an in-depth review of why I picked what I picked in my list, and that you can look at it. So that's that. MVP for this unit, for this army, had to have been the Hive Tyrant. He just killed a lot of models, and he did that Warp Ritual over and over and over, and my opponent really had to focus threats on him, diverting the rest of the forces away from the rest of my army. So great game 1 there. Game 2 against Dark Eldar. This was, in fact, my very first game against Dark Eldar with the 9th edition books. Not just the Tyrant, but the actual 9th edition Dark Eldar book. Never played against it. And I've really wanted to, and it was one of my things I hoped to get in this tournament, and I did. So it was I believe, Cabal of the Blackheart, I think. I thought I checked the list, and that's what it was. So it was 6 Raiders, 3 Ravengers, 2 Jet Fighters, and it was just Dark Lances for days. That's basically the boat army, where everything has a Dark Lance. There are multiple Dark Lances. And then the units inside, some of them had Dark Lances, and no real combat threats at all on the board besides one of the Archons was pretty scary. Other than that, they weren't really too scary. The terrain on this board was light. It was player placed, it was equal, but man, it was light. I was worried if I had gone second, I wasn't going to be around. At least some of my models weren't going to be around very long. Though, luckily enough, I did get turn 1, and that kind of sealed it. So my secondaries I took, Engage, Warp Ritual, and Banners. This was one of the objectives. I believe it is 32. I could be very wrong. It's a Dawn of War deployment one, or so you can see deployment up here, deployment down here. The objectives are like 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. It's a kind of a wonky layout one, and I've never actually played it before when I started. But it was great for Banners, great for Engage, just because of the speed of my army, and Warp Ritual is one I'm taking every single time. Got turn 1, luckily. I was able to do some pretty nasty things. So first off, my Harpy zipped up there and nuked one of the Jet Fighters turn 1, got some good rolls, and he didn't make any of his saves. So lucky there. And my Raveners also shot their way up the board and get a turn 1 charge on a ton of his boats. I was able to tie up a Ravager, and 2 Raiders, as well as killing one of the Raiders just outright and shooting beforehand. I could have tied up more Ravengers had I done it, but I didn't want to risk the charge. I needed to tie up the 3 units. I needed to kill or get a 10 on 3 dice plus 1 re-rolling, but I thought that's too much, so I went with the 7. Easily got it. I think I rolled like an 11 or something, but still got the charge. And that was really it. He did, in a turn or 2, cut down all of my Raveners, but because I had just engulfed him in his deployment zone, it was pretty much game over from that. I was able to just work the other side of the board, control that, have my banners going, and then use the rest of my warriors to engage him in the front line. He had some units that deep strike back behind me, because he can take his boats up and out of the teleport, kind of like our Encircle the Prey. But the Pyrovores guarding the back line did make quick work of all of those units. So that's game 2. Very good game for the Tyranids. Yeah, happy with that one. Game 3. This was the big stinker. So I played a Chaos list. It was, out of all the lists, I looked around the tournament. You know, you get there early the first day and you look at everyone's army. There were 2 lists I saw that I did not want to play against. It was the Imperial Knight list. The Imperial Knight list had like 8 War Dogs or Armigers, and then like 1 or 2 Big Knights. That one was going to be annoying to deal with, just with my army. The other one was this Chaos list. It's 15 Marines, a Master of Possession, a Lord Discordant, and then 1 Brass Scorpion and 2 Khorne Lord of Skulls. Now, if you don't know what these things are, the Brass Scorpion, the Khorne Lord of Skulls, they are giant Titanic units, bigger than Knights a little bit, actually quite a bit. They have 28 wounds, 3 up save. They do get Armor of Contempt. They have 5 up invuln saves because they are part demon, and they shoot a lot. They shoot a lot of strength 8 guns, damage 2, AP 2, which is all you need to chop through Tyranids at range. And yeah, it hurt. I was so baffled by what I was up against, and I did not have as much faith in my army as I should have. I picked some pretty poor secondaries, and looking at it, I should have done different ones, but he just clobbered me with the list. I did kill most of his stuff. It was too little too late, but it did happen. The secondaries I took were Stranglehold, Warp Ritual, and Retrieve Nachmund Data. I got Strangle 2 turns. I got Warp Ritual twice. I got Nachmund Data, 3 times. I should have gone for just killing his big stuff, because I did eventually, at least 2 of the 3 of them. What really solidified his win was one of 2 things. The first one was the mission. It was a hold 1, hold 2, hold more. Diagonal deployment with the 18-inch circle in the middle. I believe that was the one. No, it was the big half the board one. But still, it was a hold 1, hold 2, hold more. He got second turn, but I can't really do anything to him on my turn 1. So I just shuffled around a little bit. Didn't want to just send something out there to get absolutely nuked turn 1. His Brass Scorpion on his first turn made a 11-inch charge, which sent him all the way up around one of my flanks and allowed him to be in my face turn 1 and turn 2. Had he not made that charge, I probably could have focus fired the other ones a bit quicker and then dealt with him later, but him making that huge charge was nasty, because the Brass Scorpion, and I don't even know, my opponent was not great at telling me exactly what the thing did. I had to look it up on my own and figure it out, but apparently he explodes on like a 4+. He just ignores psychic powers, which is not great for Tyranids, on a I don't even know what. He just said he ignored them pretty much. And it explodes for 2d6 inches, d6 mortal wounds. So this thing It's a giant suicide missile that does a ton of damage in combat. Damage 6 in combat. It's got a demolisher cannon and some nasty flamer, so I didn't really want to charge it either. It runs into my deployment zone and it blows up. And it dropped, I think I did the math, it was roughly 400 or 500 points of my army dropped from the explosion because it killed most of my venom thropes. It killed a lot of my warriors, a lot of my raveners or 2 of my raveners got finished off from it. It killed some zone thropes. It killed my parasite. It killed my neurothrope. It just did devastating work. These things actually did go down relatively quick once I was able to put the work in on them. The problem is I had to focus fire, and because of the explosions, it was tough to actually do it. But the Brass Scorpion warriors going in there, a unit of 5 warriors with a pair of bone swords hitting at strength 8 is quite devastating to the thing because you're wounding it on 4s. It's 2 damage. It has no damage reduction. And for Kraken, we're hitting at AP -3, meaning it's going straight to its 5-up invuln save. So, yeah, it did die relatively easily. And I killed one of the Khorne Lord of Skulls through some small arms fire shooting and mainly mortal wounds. My Maleceptor, my Zone Thropes really powered up and dropped. I think they did together roughly 24 wounds. And then the Raveners, Death Spitters did the last 4 wounds to it or something like that. So they powered up and focused on it. Harpy did some damage to it, but they just shot it out of the sky. Once he saw what it could do, he focus fired it and it went down pretty quick, even with a 4-up invuln save and transhuman. So that is what it is. I just, yeah, not really an MVP for that game. But it was tough. Had I played him again, or even on a different mission, I probably could have beat him, now knowing what everything does better. But it was nasty. So that was my loss. Big loss, but unfortunate. So let me go to game 4. Yeah, no MVP for that one. Game 4 now was against Space Wolves. If you've seen any of my tournament results in the past, whether it was the one where I went 3-0 in RTT, or my Hierophant one where I went 3-1 at a mini GT, this is the same Space Wolf player, the same list, identical. So maybe I will remember to put a video in the corner if you want to see his list. He's a very good player. He has been playing this exact list for all of 9th edition now, and he knows it inside and out and can make it really good. So snuck out a win on him, 57-55. The scores are a little low because we were only able to fit in 4 turns with the time. Unfortunate, because going into turn 5, don't know who would have won. He was pretty convinced he would win. I'm pretty convinced I would win. So we ended it though on turn 4. I did go second in this game, and this one also played very cagey with him. My secondaries I took were Stranglehold, Warp Ritual, and No Prisoners because he was a 100% infantry-based army, so No Prisoners was a pretty obvious go-to for me there. Stranglehold, I'm pretty sure I maxed it out for the turns that I had. Warp Ritual maxed out. No Prisoners, I got like 10 points on, so really it just came down to not having a score of... Oh, actually... I think Stranglehold, I did not get it every turn. I think I only got it 3 of the 4 turns. So yeah, had I played it out fully, it would have been an extra maybe 12 points for primary, plus 3 for Strangle. So an extra 15 points. So we're looking at a 72 pointer. This one, really, it felt like the list was playing to its full strengths. The Raveners were absolutely the MVP. Waited till turn 2, I think, to send him off into his lines, but he went off and wiped out 2 of his 4 intercessor squads. And the way he plays his list, I mean, his intercessor squads are what are scoring backfield objectives all day and night. So killing those 2 units in melee were really important. He also the Raveners ripped open a Blade Guard veteran squad. He did roll pretty poor on his saves, but I did wipe 3 Blade Guard veterans out of 4 with just the Ravener shooting. So that was good. And then he also stalled his Terminator block and his Chapter Master for a turn and a half because they had to go back and deal with these Raveners before they just went around and cleaned up the rest of his army. I also would say, you know, this is the first game that Parasite really came into doing his stuff. Turn 1, this was the mission where you had to plant bombs, and for every bomb that's left on the table, it is 4 victory points at the end of the game. So really, the Parasite, you could say, won me the game because turn 1, I zipped him up there and I planted a bomb. And then because I had the Warlord trait, Alien Cunning, he counted as objective secured, meaning it planted at the end of the turn instead of at the start of the command phase. And with that bomb plant, after it was planted, encircle the prey, pull him off, and then he went back to support another flank with the gargoyles and some other warriors. That bomb did end up being the final piece of resistance to winning the game. It was very cagey in the middle with my Hive Tyrant and my Maliceptor and my Zoanthropes sitting behind one set of buildings, and then he had more Terminators and his Smash characters. He had a lot of powerful characters. Those guys sitting behind buildings. It was more of, okay, who's going to sit on the center objective? So I was trading, I'd send my warriors out there, and then he would kill them. And then I would send my Venomthropes out there, actually, the Hormigons, and then he'd kill them. Then I sent my Venomthropes out there, and he'd kill them. I did not want to be the one who sent a valuable unit out there first, and then let him send the valuable unit out first and let that lose to one of his, and then I would be in the backwards end of the trading deal. It was more so I wanted to be trading up to him. So that's exactly what I did. Warriors and Psychic Powers dealt with the other Blade Guard veterans, and then, yeah, ended the game there with that one. I think everything... Hive Tyrant did do a horrible job at the end of the game. I wouldn't have necessarily done the play I did if I knew this was going to be my last turn, but I sent him in after his little Smash character who has like 7 attacks at damage 3, AP 3, strength 7, which will slice up the Hive Tyrant, and he did. He got 7 wounds through on a perfect roll, and I made 1 4-up save. So Hive Tyrant, even with Catalyst, got murdered, but he did his job beforehand. Yeah, so it was a great game. Everything played perfectly. The Heartbeat tanked a lot of crack missiles in the first turn with the 4-up Invuln Transhuman. Really allowed them to move up and around the list with the Raveners, providing Synapse. So that was that game. Finally, we get to the last game. Technically in Battlescribe, best coast pairings, it says 69, nice to 71 for him. Is actually, had we scored it properly, it was 73-71. What happened, it was a great game to him. I thought I was losing by a long shot, and I came back. What happened is my little Parasite here, we didn't score his Data Scry points, and that was the mission where it's 4 objectives along the center in Diag and No Man's Land, and then the 2 in your own deployments across the other Diag, and it's a hold 2, hold 3, hold more. So pretty low primary scoring for the most part. But he had another Dark Eldar list, very different to the prior one. This one had Kronos and a lot of melee threat. He had the Court of the Archon, terrifying characters, Incubi, which are just brutal in combat. Drazar was the big bad in that list was Drazar, and then some witches, which didn't do a whole lot. It felt kind of like a mirror match. Both of us really were fast. We hit hard. The difference being he had much better shooting, and I had much better psychic. His shooting, his Kronos, they have just some absurd guns on them. Still not totally sure what they are. I know stat-wise what they are. They're like strength 6. AP minus 2 damage, and on 6 of the wound, they're 3 damage. They just nasty things. And he's got one that's a flamer version, one that's a non-flamer version. They got a ton of wounds, super tanky. Yeah, so it was pretty good. He butchered a lot of my stuff. I went with secondaries of Engage, Warp Ritual, and Retrieve Noctman Data. I did do Noctman Data 3 times in this mission. I did max out Warp Ritual, and I believe I got 8 points. 8 points for Engage. Yeah, 8 points for Engage. So not the highest score, but that was what it was. Parasite, again, had to have been the MVP, and I'll talk about it later at the end, but the ability for him to do some of those basic actions that other models in your army, like your warriors, you don't really want to be wasting your warriors on doing actions, or your pyrovores. You could have had your Venomthropes doing them, but him being able to just fly around the board, do the actions where he needs to, provide synapse, he was probably pretty clutch in that. So I would give him the MVP because he did do Data Scry twice of the 4 times I did it, which gave me 8 points, which was huge. That little guy, I say 10 primary points here. Maybe it was 10. I thought it was 8. Anyway, the Maliceptor would probably be a very close second to the MVP. He dumped out so many mortal wounds. So many mortal wounds that game. He did not have the anti-tank fire to take on the Maliceptor for the first couple turns. And then he was, throwing threats on the midfield, and he was just you guys know how scary Maliceptors are. Letting one go to town for three turns was, his mortal wounds were definitely up in the 20s, I think, for what he did. He did die. He met his match from some Incubi. The Incubi having the ability to turn Andrazar to make any of your units fight last was huge. I mean, my Ravners got demolished because Ravner's weakness are Incubi, or Drazar, because they are 2-3 damage weapons. They make you fight last based on a 2d6 roll versus your leadership. Ravners only have a leadership 6, so he was very easy to pass the 7+ roll on 2 dice every single time, and that really allowed him to cut down my Ravners. So sad there for the Ravners, but I was pretty okay with the results. Trying to think if there's anything else. The Pyrovores did very good work there. I don't think I mentioned them much. I will talk about them more. Pyrovores did well there. Zoanthropes did well. Warriors did fine. The Hive Tyrant did all right. He got focus fired by blasters and dark lances for like 3 turns. So he did a lot of work tanking my opponent's shooting, and all of his anti-tank shooting was going into the Hive Tyrant, forcing him to move into positions he didn't really want to in order to get line of sight on him. It was pretty good. He did my Warp Rituals, most of them. We're gonna just go through typical how I rate them. I'll give a little bit of thoughts on all of them, but nothing too crazy. I'll try to answer some questions. I know some people put questions in the comments of my last video. I'll try and touch on all of those while I talk about the list and some pros and cons and things. So we'll just go into it. So first off, the Flying Hive Tyrant. What do I think about him? He's awesome. Honestly, for me, he didn't have too many big moments where it was, he's gonna go in and slice down my opponent to good measure, being a big combat threat. It was much more, besides the Custodes player, it was much more, I fly him in, he cuts down simple units, guaranteeing kills, he's doing my action, he's providing synapse, and then he's falling back with overrun or encircle the prey, preferably overrun on him. And he's providing the reroll 1 aura. That's how I valued my Hive Tyrant in the tournament. It wasn't him sending him off, being an absolute missile in towards my enemy. It was much more a support list waiting for the opportune time to strike with him, and then going from there. So I still give him an A. Again, his kill count wasn't high, wasn't spectacularly off the roof or off the charts by any means, but he did exactly what I needed him to do, and that won me a lot of my games. The Tyranid Prime, our little support buddy, again, same thing with him. His kill count was not anywhere crazy high. Got a few shots popped off with his Venom Cannon, killed a few backfield deep strikers or units with his Bone Swords. He got nuked by a Brass Scorpion, so that was unfortunate, through the explosion. But he also was able to provide the reroll 1s to wound and +1 to hit, which were so big for my Raveners and even my Warriors at times too. So that was very worth it. I was able to use some Shard Lure with the Venom Cannon shooting down range because he has Synapse. So I'm happy with the Tyranid Prime. Again, he's not expensive, so I wasn't asking him to do much, but the buffs alone I think were worth it for him. The Neurothrope, the first time you'll see an A+ on this. It was awesome. I mean, this thing never once failed a psychic power. Keep him outside of, if my opponents did have some sort of denying, keep him outside of that back range and just link the powers up. That has to be, linking psychic powers has to be the coolest, most powerful, fluffiest everything in the Tyranid Codex, and I absolutely love it. And because I'm using Onslaught with the Raveners so much, him being able to reliably get Onslaught off without having to think about it was great. And then passing off Warp Siphon to whether it's the Hive Tyrant, the Zoanthropes, or the Maliceptor, or whoever needed the Mortal Wound or Psychic buff for the turn, also great. 10 out of 10, A+, we'll take every time. Next, we'll go on to the troop choices. We had the Hormagaunts, just a simple 10-man block. These guys did exactly what I had them for. They were fast. They moved on to the outflanked objectives. They maybe raised a banner or just hitting cover, providing me with engage in all fronts or stranglehold, things like that. Didn't expect them to kill anything. I don't think they got a single kill all game or all tournament. No, I don't think they got a single kill. Oh no, they did. They killed 4 Dark Eldar warriors. Yeah, that's it. So again, not expecting them to do much, but they did exactly what they needed to, scoring the points, and that's why I had them. Similar to the Gargoyles, they flew around, they scored their banners, they sat on their objectives, they flew away. I typically put them in the more risky spot so I could pull them away if I needed to, or waited for later turns. I couldn't have asked for anything more from them, except for the one time where I failed. I had 10 saves, 10 6-up saves, and I needed to make one of them. I failed all 10 of them. If I had kept that one alive, it would have made one of the games even easier. But nonetheless, Gargoyles, recommend them. They did great. The Scything Talon Warriors, the unit of 4 that I brought with all Scything Talons, I treated them as more of my cheaper trading units. So again, like I'd rushed them into, typically they're the first unit I put on the center objective out of my whole army. And yes, they're a little expensive for just doing it that way, but they also had the option if I needed to turn 1 charge something. They were great for that. Playing against non-Space Marines, even against Space Marines, they're AP -2 in the charge and Kraken. So that was still hitting 7 attacks apiece at AP -1 will do some damage. But if I went up against non-Space Marine stuff, the AP -2 7 attacks is a lot for any opponent to deal with. The Bone Sword Warriors were great as well. They cut down a lot. They provided Synapse. They were at times pretty squishy depending on what shot at them and if I had the Invone on or not. But even without that, I'm very happy with the way the Warriors performed. Typically, I played them on the flanks, these 2 blocks of Warriors, for Synapse, controlling key outward objectives, and then maybe doing some actions. I think there's a couple times I even had them doing like a banner or some other action, but Warriors, very happy with there. Venomthropes, this is going to be the first B+, And it's tough with the Venonthropes because I got them in the list expecting to play gunline armies, like, you know, maybe playing a bunch of Tau or playing shooty Space Marines, because typically Space Marines are more shooty than they are combat based. I think. I was expecting that. I expected, you know, Dark Eldar to be very shooty, and I was expecting even other shooty Tyranids. So I didn't play a ton of heavy gun lines where the -1 was all that important. They typically followed around, if they could, the Hive Tyrant, the Maliceptor, and the Zoanthropes, maybe some of the Warriors and the Raveners in the very beginning of the game, and just make sure I had a -1 hit bubble for extra durability. I did some actions with them. They sat on the home objective often just because I needed a unit on my home objective. And importantly, they did grant, when my opponent started coming close, they could grant fight last to my opponent. And that was clutch in many situations when, you know, the Brass Scorpion, there's nothing that stops the Venonthropes from putting fight last onto a Brass Scorpion. So doing a few extra mortal wounds and giving off the fight last was worth it, in my opinion, enough to keep them in the list. So they didn't have to deal a ton, but they weren't also worth a ton. So I'm okay with them. Maliceptor, Maliceptor was an absolute monster. I played him very reserved in a lot of games just because I did not want him to get picked out right away. He did his stuff. Whenever the opponent came close to the center objectives, he walked out and melted them. So I'm happy with the Maliceptor. Zoanthropes, very similar. I kept them very reserved. I did not want them to get targeted out when they didn't need to be, and wait for the opportune time to see a target that needed mortal wounds to be dealt to them, and then float them out, dish out the super smites, and then let them be. Yeah, there were some games where I didn't even super smite or smite with them until turn 3 or 4, just because there was no targets for them and I didn't want to risk them getting overexposed if I didn't have to. So fine with them. Pyrovores. These are ones where, as the game went on, my love for them went higher and higher, specifically because I started putting them in strategic reserve as the games went on. Especially game 4 and 5 were both strategic reserve. Games 1, 2, and 3 were not. I really wish I did put them in strategic reserve game 3. I think that might have actually been able to help swing me in the other direction, but I didn't. Yeah, I loved them. They were able to clean out my opponent's back lines. In this game against the Space Wolves, I had 2 CP left and I dumped them both onto him. One of them for a nasty Overwatch, which melted, I think I melted 2 Terminators in Overwatch. And then when so Terminators charged in, they made it. Chapter Master came in. I used the Acid Blood and bled all over the Chapter Master, killing him after he killed, 2 of them. And then they died to the Terminator, but he did 2 more wounds. So it's just a lone Terminator with 1 wound. So a Chapter Master, 4 Terminators for 90 points of Pyrovores and some CP. That was a great trade. Plus they were, just threats. My opponent had to plan to screen them out for deep striking or walking on strategic reserve style on the other side of his table too. So Pyrovores, very happy with there. They're also devastatingly good against Eldar and Dark Eldar. So if you play a lot of those guys, these guys are awesome. Fast attack, Raveners, they get the A. They were the centerpiece of this army, slinging them around the board, doing tons of damage in the shooting, and more importantly, the melee combat phase. Fight phase, technically. But yeah, they're awesome. I waited. Yeah, I said this in the other video, but you have to be very careful with the Raveners. You can make them pretty durable with potentially an invuln save and feel no pain and just their natural bulk. But you gotta wait until your opponent gives you an opportunity to lunge at them. And then use Encircle the Prayer Overrun if you need to. Definitely did that where my opponent went just a little bit too far forward, zipped them up there, destroyed a whole bunch of transports, or, well, for the Drukhari it was transports, or charged them into melee, and then as soon as that, okay, we're getting it's too dicey, they're gonna get gunned down, pull them away, put them back up in your deployment zone by the venom thropes or something to be safe, load up all the buffs on them again, and then launch them out back at your opponent for round 2. Very much love the Raveners. Were they the full-time MVP of this army? Maybe, but that would be, they're up there. The Parasite, the biggest question mark I had going forward was the little Parasite. And he was really tough to judge in the game. He was only worth 80 points in the CP because I gave him the Alien Cunning Whirler trait. But for 80 points, he did great. The original thoughts were to keep him with the Raveners, which they did do. But the Raveners are way too fast for the Parasite to keep up, especially because they're going in the danger zone and you don't want your Parasite there. So what would really happen for me is the Parasite would guide the Raveners, in the first turn or two, providing that synaptic link, because this little guy is Synapse, so if I keep, warriors within 12 inches of him around the Raveners, and then all my Psychic within range of those warriors, he was the one who was passing Catalyst and Onslaught and the buffs all onto the Raveners to really load them up, turn them up to 11. And then I launched Raveners off. Now you're thinking, okay, what would happen with the Raveners? They're out of Synapse. No, I would use the Harpy, which is a Synapse creature, to keep them in Synapse, to allow those buffs to keep going. It didn't work out every game that the Harpy would able to be exactly with the Raveners, but most of the time, at least for the first turn, the Raveners were able to stay with the Harpy or vice versa, and that's all you needed. After that, the rest of the army could catch up with the Raveners, or the Raveners would fall back to the rest of the army and vice versa. So very happy with the Parasite. Even though he didn't do much, he killed one Dark Eldar warrior, and he planted a bomb, and he did some actions. But for 80 points and providing that synaptic link, I think he was absolutely worth it. Now, if I was not playing Kraken and I was not going for all this speed, maybe I would take him out and put Death Leaper in. But for the way this army ran, he was perfect. I love the speed on him, even though he can be targeted versus the targeted if he's, the Death Leaper's got its own fancy tricks, but I think the Parasite is a good alternative if you don't want to play the Death Leaper. Is he better? I don't know, but he's a good alternative depending on your list. And finally, I talked in a bit already, the Harpy. I give it a B+ because it did exactly what I wanted it to. I did not treat this thing as my giant gunboat, as it's going to go in and destroy all these vehicles. I think the Harpy is great for doing damage. I don't know. You'd say it's probably worth it, but I love playing mine with the Synapse. For one turn, I could give it the 4 Invuln save, and then I could be Synapse creatures around, give it the exploding 6s if it was still alive for that turn. And I did use the melee one at one point too, because he was still alive and I dropped him down into hover mode for charging. But really, I knew if my opponent had anti-flyer, anti-tank shooting, he wasn't going to make it to turn 2 whether he had an Invuln or not. So I'd use the Invuln on the first turn or the second turn depending on the layout, and just send him up there with the Raveners. Know that if you don't shoot the Harpy, then the Raveners are going to... If you shoot the Harpy, the Raveners are going to deal with you, and if you shoot the Raveners, then you got a Harpy flying around your backline dropping bombs. And then the bomb aspect to him was great. Fly him up, drop some bombs to go flutter over by the center objectives, and then just hide him there, ready to explode at any notice, which they did some damage there. But it does die quick, and with Armor of Contempt, the Venom Cannons aren't as good as they were initially. So that's kind of how I play it there. Would I change anything in this list? I say no. I'm very, very happy with the way the points are, assuming, maybe some points come later on. Who knows? Point changes come on. I say this for me, for my play style, is perfect Kraken. And I check a box off there saying Kraken, done. Figured out, mastered, in my opinion, for my type of play style. It is fast when it needs to be fast. It's not a, I'm going to throw everything at you, charge, blah, 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 see if you can survive, see if I can survive. It's durable, it's fast, it plays cagey, and if you don't know that, what I mean by that is I don't have, it is that what I said, I don't have to just charge out at you. I can, hide behind terrain, wait for the moment to strike, and then strike, and when I do strike, I kill. It's not I strike, I kind of get you tied up in combat, we fight back and forth a little bit, I'm just fast. No, I hit hard, I hit fast, and I can get away with the stratagems if I need to. So I love that. Right now, the Kraken, the AP, you can take the bonus to your charging, and with that extra AP, it's a really good counter to the Armor of Contempt that people just got. For, even just Scything Talons, they go from AP 1 to 2, with Armor of Contempt back down to 1. Still having AP on Scything Talons is great. Rending Claws are just stupid AP 5. With that many attacks, people are throwing 2-up saves on you. I would imagine to see, not only Terminators and stuff, but Centurions might make a comeback, and they have 2-up saves. So Raveners being AP -5 pretty much chunk through them. They'll still get 6-up saves, but that's not a big deal. I will say the only thing that the list does struggle with, which you saw is with my game recaps, is large quantities of tank, or high armor, high toughness, high wound count. So this list might struggle against Tyranid lists. There were a couple other Tyranid lists. I'll talk about those in a second. But I would imagine that a Tyranid list would be one of the best counters to this list. A high monster mash list is not what this can handle. We do have a lot of Psychic, but Tyranids have Psychic Denial, which is why I'd say go back and forth. For me, the anti-tank in this army is the Hive Tyrant, and it's the Mortal Wound output. When I played the 3 Titans, yeah, I killed 2 of them, and yeah, the Warriors can kill them, but it's a lot to deal with sometimes. So that's the biggest struggle to the list. I think a Monster Mash Tyranid army specifically, let's say that's Kronos. Let's say Jormungandr one would be tricky, but not really as much. It will still be tricky, but that's it. I would call this a check off the box if I did make any changes to the list, because it's always worth looking at what could you do better, or what could be better, but the grass isn't always greener on the other side. CP regen is a Kraken, specialty, and I did not have it in the list. My Warlord traits were the Direct Guidance and Alien Cunning, and then the Synaptic Tendrils. And I honestly think I got more use out of those 3 than I would have on the CP regen. My thoughts for this. So the way the CP regen works is every time they spend a stratagem on a 5-up, you get a command point back. Most people spend, let's say they have 10 CP to start. Most people will spend 8 of those within the first 3 turns. And you might, out of those 3 turns, get 1 or 2 back, which is 1 CP. But after that, is it worth giving up a good Warlord trait to net you 1 or 2 CP over a game? Or would you just have better luck using a better Warlord trait to begin with than relying on your CP? I definitely see it going both ways, but I don't know. I just, if I didn't break up the blocks, this is where I'll go into it. If I wanted to break it up, I would drop 1 Pyrovore, so 1 unit of 2 for 60 points. I would break up my Raveners into 2 5-man blocks, or 2 5-man blocks. Then it's not as important that I'm dumping all of the buffs onto 1 unit at a time. It's still good, but it's not as important because I have multiple smaller units. So at that point, I would probably remove Direct Guidance and add the CP regen in that case. But that's about it. I'm calling this Kraken list check. If you think you got a better Kraken list, I know someone was saying, you know, try playing Swarmy and turn the Ravners and Obsec, which sounds awesome. Maybe I'll try that in the future if I want to spice things up a little bit. But this is how I see Kraken being, for me, top notch until we get some point changes on probably the Maliceptor, and then some things are going to have to tweak. But that's that. So now I just want to cover a little bit. There were 4 Tyranid armies, like I said. So I want to just cover a little bit on those, give my insight. So of the 4 Tyranid armies, we had one go 5-1 or 5-0. He won the GT. I really wish I got to play him because I think I could have taken his list. It was a cool list. It was Leviathan, but I thought I could have had him. Unfortunately, I got screwed being matched up against that giant chaos army, and that was no bueno for me. But that is the way the cookie crumbles. So he went 5-0. I might cover his list in depth later if you guys want to see it. I went 4-1, and the 2 others went 3-2 and 3-2. So total of 20-5 for a win-loss ratio on the Tyranids. I actually think there was technically a mirror match between the 2 3-2 guys. So you could take out that based on the mirror match, but that's it. Hive fleets used, first place and third place of the Tyranids were Hive Fleet Leviathan. I was Kraken, and then the last guy was Behemoth, running some cool Carnifex spam and Trigon Primes and stuff. Units everybody had in common, so everyone had the exact same Flying Hive Tyrant with the Reaper and Adrenal Glands. Everyone had Tyranid Warriors, though the unit size varied between everyone. So I had 2 5s in a 4-man block. There were one of the lists was using 3 4-man blocks. One of the lists was using a 9-man block and 2 3-man blocks, and one of them was just using an 8-man block and a 4-man block or something. Some different weird loadout there. So everyone had warriors, but different sizes, meaning warriors are good no matter what size you bring them in. Everyone had a Maliceptor, and everyone had at least 3 Zoanthropes. One guy had a unit of 5. 3 out of 4 of us all had a Neurothrope. One guy didn't bring one. We all had at least 1 unit of Venom. Well, not all of us. 3 of us had at least 1 unit of Venomthropes, and 3 of us all had at least 1 unit of Hormagaunts, showing that taking some of these cheaper units just to move around the board is very powerful. So that's about the recap. I might do a list. Let me know what you guys think. I might do a video later on touching on some of the higher rated Tyranid armies. Looking at them, it seems like almost all of them are Leviathan, and then there's my list, and maybe I saw one other Kraken list that made a 4-1 appearance. So I might touch on those in another video. Let me know if you want me to, and we can go through those. And just a final conclusion, after playing, now I've played a good amount of games with this army, with this list, just to touch on it. I don't care if the nerf hammer comes for the Tyranids. If we keep the fundamental play style of how the Tyranids run, I am totally okay. This book feels so fluffy, so much like whoever wrote this one did a great job with the flow of the Tyranid army. Not talking about the balance. If some things are definitely undercosted, maybe some things are a little too strong, like, you know, Venom cannons are really powerful in some ways, but despite the cost balancing part, the actual flow of how the Tyranids play, I love it. I love it. I love it. I think it is delicious, and I hope it stays when the Nerf bat comes for us, being potentially now the next boogeyman. Changes I would see: Maliceptor, Hive Tyrants, specifically Flying Hive Tyrants, and Warriors. I expect all of those to get a nice, healthy point bump. Hive Tyrants, Flying Hive Tyrants, I'd see going up 5-10 points. Warriors, I could see going up maybe 2 points a model to 27 points a model. Maliceptor should easily get a 15-point bump, maybe a little bit more. But that's how I would see that one working. I'll call High Fleet Kraken a success. Let me know what you think about this. Any other questions that I didn't perfectly answer that you might have on the list, let me know down in the comments below. What should I try next for the list I want to try, or the High Fleet I want to try and master? I do want to stay away from High Fleet Leviathan because it's obvious when I'm looking at other people's lists, 90% of them, 85% of them are High Fleet Leviathan. And why try and master something when everyone else is playing it? Let's try something different. That's half the reason I wanted to try Kraken, is because I think while High Fleet Leviathan is good, there are other armies, other lists that you can make out of the other ones that are not only fun, but also competitive. So let me know. Jormungandr I think has some sneaky stuff. I don't know if I have all the right models to pull off what I want to with Jormungandr. Hydra could also be fun. Gorgon, Behemoth. Let me know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I'll cut it off there. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios.